The coffee was still warm when I caught my wife setting the perfect trap. Not for mice or bugs, but for me. I'm Simon Barrett, 42 years old, senior IT consultant for 3 different companies, and apparently married to a woman who thinks I'm stupid enough to fall for amateur hour manipulation. The irony would be hilarious if it weren't so pathetic. It was a Tuesday morning in our colonial house in Millbrook, Maine. Elise was standing at our granite kitchen counter, perfectly dressed as always, scrolling through her phone with that calculating look she gets when she's planning something. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wears to intimidate people at her HR director job. "Honey," she said without looking up, "I invited someone to join us for drinks Friday at the Blue Heron, a colleague from work." I paused mid-sip. Elise never invited colleagues anywhere. She barely tolerated her own friends, let alone mine. "Really? That's unlike you. Her name's Cassie. She's new in town, doesn't know many people. I thought you might enjoy meeting her." The way she said it with that fake casual tone set off every alarm bell in my head. "Sure," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Sounds great." What I didn't tell Elise was that I already knew Cassie. Cassie Morrison, 28, brunette with green eyes and assistant to Walter Peck, the divorce attorney I'd been secretly meeting with for the past 3 months. See, while my dear wife thought she was playing chess, I'd been playing a completely different game. The game where I already knew her moves before she made them. It started 6 months ago when I noticed the changes. Elise working late constantly, new clothes, expensive perfume, and that glow women get when they're doing something they think is exciting and dangerous. I'm not an idiot. I've been married to her for 8 years. I know when something's off. So I did what any smart husband would do. I hired a private investigator. Meet Brett Kincaid, 36, regional sales director for a medical supply company, drives a silver Tesla, and has been sleeping with my wife every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 4 months. He's everything I'm not. Flashy, loud, drives expensive cars, and apparently has convinced my wife that he's her ticket to a better life. The private investigator, a former cop named Murphy, gave me photos, dates, hotel receipts, the whole package. But more importantly, he gave me something else. The knowledge that Elise and Brett were planning something bigger than just an affair. They were planning to destroy me. Murphy's surveillance revealed meetings between Elise and Brett where they discussed getting rid of the dead weight and making sure he can't take anything. They were planning to frame me for something, infidelity, maltreatment, anything that would give Elise grounds for a divorce that would leave me with nothing. That's when I contacted Walter Peck. Walter is 63 years old, been practicing family law for 35 years, and has seen every dirty trick in the book. When I explained the situation, he smiled like a shark smelling blood. "Mr. Barrett," he said in his gravelly voice, "your wife is about to make a very expensive mistake. Let's make sure she pays for it." Walter's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. We would let Elise think she was in control while documenting everything. Every meeting, every plan, every attempt to manipulate or frame me would be recorded and cataloged. And now, sitting in my kitchen listening to my wife set up what she clearly thought was a loyalty test, I realized the trap was about to spring. "So what does Cassie do?" I asked, playing dumb. "Oh, she works at a law firm downtown, paralegal or something." Elise's voice had that sing-song quality she uses when she's lying. "She's very pretty. I think you'll like her." I almost laughed. My wife was literally trying to set me up with my own divorce attorney's assistant, the woman who had been helping me document Elise's affair and plan my exit strategy for months. "I'm sure I will," I said, finishing my coffee. "Friday at the Blue Heron sounds perfect." Elise smiled, and for a moment I saw the hunter behind the suburban housewife mask. She thought she was so clever, so in control. She had no idea that her perfect trap was about to become her perfect downfall. I kissed her goodbye, the same perfunctory peck we'd been exchanging for years, and headed to work. But instead of going to my office, I drove straight to Walter's law firm. Time to finalize the endgame. Walter Peck's office smelled like old leather and victory. The walls were lined with law books and framed certificates, but what caught my attention were the photos. Walter with judges, politicians, and what looked like very satisfied clients. "Simon." Walter stood up from behind his mahogany desk extending a weathered hand. Perfect timing. Cassie just finished typing up the final paperwork. Cassie Morrison looked up from her computer and smiled. She was exactly as Walter had described her. Professional, intelligent, and completely believable, as someone my wife would think was naive enough to be manipulated. "Mr. Barrett," Cassie said, standing to shake my hand, "I have to say, this is the most interesting case I've worked on. Your wife really thinks she's masterminded something brilliant." "Tell me about it," I said, settling into the leather chair across from Walter's desk. "She actually used the word colleague when describing you. Elise has never voluntarily introduced me to a colleague in 8 years of marriage." Walter chuckled. "Amateurs always overplay their hand. Now let's review the plan for Friday night." He spread out a folder containing surveillance photos, financial records, and what looked like a detailed timeline. The photos showed Elise and Brett at various hotels, restaurants, and at Brett's condo. The financial records showed money being moved from our joint accounts into a private account I'd never seen before. "Your wife has been very busy," Walter continued. "She's moved approximately $47,000 into a private account over the past 2 months. Small amounts, thinking you wouldn't notice." "I noticed," I said grimly. "I just didn't say anything." "Smart man." "Now here's what we know about Friday night. Cassie will arrive at the Blue Heron at 7:30. You'll be there with Elise. Cassie will approach your table. Elise will introduce her. And then Elise will conveniently remember she has to make some phone calls for work." Cassie picked up the narrative. "I'll stay and chat with you, maybe flirt a little, see if you take the bait. Meanwhile, Elise will be watching from somewhere nearby, probably with her friend Maggie as a witness." Maggie Chen, I should have seen that coming. Elise's best friend since college, runs a yoga studio downtown, and has never liked me. She's exactly the type of person Elise would bring as backup to witness my supposed infidelity. "The beauty of this plan," Walter said, leaning back in his chair, is that your wife is creating evidence of her own premeditation. She's literally documenting her attempt to frame you. Every photo Maggie takes, every witness she brings, every step of this elaborate setup becomes evidence of conspiracy and fraud. I felt a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. "And after Friday night?" "After Friday night, we spring the trap. Divorce papers will be filed Monday morning. But not the papers your wife is expecting." Walter pulled out another folder, this one thick with legal documents. "Instead of being served with papers that paint you as an unfaithful husband, your wife will be served with papers documenting her infidelity, financial fraud, and conspiracy. Every hotel receipt, every moved dollar, every meeting with Brett Kincaid, all of it." "What about Brett?" I asked. Cassie smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Mr. Kincaid is about to have some problems of his own. Turns out his expense reports at work don't quite match his actual activities. All those business trips with your wife? His company is very interested in learning about them." "You reported him to his employer?" "I didn't have to," Walter said. "Murphy, your private investigator, has a contact in their accounting department. Apparently, Brett has been billing personal expenses as business costs for months. His company takes fraud very seriously." The pieces were falling into place beautifully. While Elise and Brett thought they were orchestrating my downfall, we were systematically destroying both of their lives. "There's one more thing," Cassie said, pulling out her phone. "Your wife has been texting me all week, coaching me on how to properly seduce you. She's given me specific instructions on what to wear, what to say, even what perfume to use." She showed me the text messages. Elise had written detailed instructions like she was directing a play. The level of calculation was breathtaking. "She really thinks she's a criminal mastermind," I said, reading through the messages. "The best part," Walter said, "is that all of these text messages are evidence of premeditation. When this goes to court, the judge will see exactly how much planning went into trying to frame you." I looked at both of them, these two people who had become my allies in what felt like a war I didn't start but was damn sure going to finish. "Friday night then?" "Nothing," I said, standing up. "Let's give my wife exactly what she thinks she wants." As I left Walter's office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. For too long, I'd been reacting to Elise's moves, playing defense while she thought she was running the game. But Friday night, the roles would reverse. My phone buzzed with a text from Elise. "Don't forget about drinks Friday. I think you'll really enjoy meeting Cassie." I texted back, looking forward to it. If she only knew how much. Friday night arrived with the kind of crisp October air that makes Maine beautiful and dangerous at the same time. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror adjusting my tie while Elise put on what she probably thought was the perfect outfit for watching her husband's downfall. "You look nice," she said, smoothing down her black dress. "Special occasion?" "Just want to make a good impression on your colleague," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. The Blue Heron sits on the corner of Main and Elm, a local institution that's been serving overpriced drinks to Millbrook's professional class for 30 years. It's exactly the kind of place where Elise would want to stage her little drama, public enough to have witnesses, but intimate enough for private conversations. We arrived at 7:15. Elise immediately scanned the room like a general surveying a battlefield, choosing a table with clear sightlines to the bar and entrance. She was nervous, I could tell, but trying to hide it behind her usual mask of suburban sophistication. "Cassie should be here soon," she said, checking her phone for the third time in 5 minutes. "No rush," I said, ordering a whiskey. "I'm enjoying the evening already." At exactly 7:30, Cassie Morrison walked through the front door. She'd followed Elise's instructions perfectly. Red dress, black heels, hair down, and just enough makeup to look approachable but sophisticated. She was playing her part to perfection. "Oh, there she is." Elise waved Cassie over with theatrical enthusiasm. "Cassie, over here." Cassie approached our table with a smile that looked genuine to anyone who didn't know better. "Elise, thank you so much for inviting me. I don't know many people in town yet. Cassie, this is my husband Simon. Simon, this is Cassie Morrison. She just moved here from Portland." I stood to shake her hand, playing the polite husband. "Nice to meet you, Cassie. Elise mentioned you work at a law firm?" "That's right, downtown. I'm an assistant at Peck & Associates, mostly family law." Elise's eyes flickered with something that might have been suspicion, but she pushed it aside. She was too invested in her plan to recognize the irony. "Well, sit down. Join us." Elise gestured to the empty chair. "I'll just order some appetizers." For the next 20 minutes, we made small talk. Cassie was brilliant, asking me questions about my work, laughing at my jokes, and gradually building what looked like genuine chemistry. Meanwhile, Elise kept checking her phone and glancing around the room. "Oh, you know what?" Elise said suddenly. "I just remembered I have to make some calls for work. Big presentation Monday morning. Cassie, would you mind keeping Simon company? I'll just be a few minutes." "Of course," Cassie said. "Take your time." Elise grabbed her purse and headed toward the back of the restaurant, but I caught her reflection in the mirror behind the bar. She wasn't going to make phone calls. She was positioning herself where she could watch our table while staying hidden. "Your wife is very dedicated to her work," Cassie said, loud enough for any listening devices. "She certainly is," I replied. "Sometimes I feel like I barely see her anymore." And then Cassie did something brilliant. She reached across the table and touched my hand, a gesture that would look intimate to anyone watching, but was actually her passing me a small piece of paper. I palmed it smoothly, continuing our conversation about work and life in Millbrook while reading the note under the table. Maggie Chen at the bar, taking photos with her phone. I glanced casually toward the bar and spotted her immediately. Maggie was trying to look casual, nursing a martini while obviously photographing our table. She wasn't very good at surveillance. "You know," I said to Cassie, raising my voice slightly, "I have to admit, it's nice talking to someone new. Elise and I don't seem to connect like we used to." Cassie leaned forward, playing her part perfectly. "That must be difficult. Marriage requires so much work." "It does. Sometimes I wonder if we're just going through the motions." I could practically feel Elise's excitement from across the room. This was exactly what she wanted to hear, exactly what she needed for her plan. Cassie and I continued our performance for another 15 minutes. She laughed at my stories, asked personal questions about my marriage, and even suggested we could continue this conversation sometime when Elise wasn't around. When Elise returned to the table, she was practically glowing with satisfaction. "Sorry about that," she said, sliding back into her chair. "Crisis averted." "No problem," Cassie said. "Simon was telling me about his work. It sounds fascinating." "Oh, it is," Elise said, but her attention was clearly elsewhere. She was already planning her next move. We finished our drinks and said goodbye to Cassie, who made sure to give me her personal phone number while Elise watched. As we walked to the parking lot, I could feel my wife's barely contained excitement. "She seems nice," I said casually. "Very nice," Elise agreed. "And she certainly seemed to like you." "You think so?" "Oh, definitely. The way she was looking at you, touching your hand, I think you made quite an impression." I played dumb. I was just being friendly. "Of course you were, honey. You're always so charming with new people." That night, Elise was more affectionate than she'd been in months. She thought she'd won, thought she'd gathered the evidence she needed to destroy me in divorce court. She fell asleep with a smile on her face. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Monday morning. In 3 days, Elise would be served with divorce papers. But not the papers she was expecting. Not the papers that would paint me as an unfaithful husband who deserved nothing. Instead, she would receive papers that documented every hotel receipt, every moved dollar, every lie she'd told over the past 6 months. Papers that would destroy her reputation, her career, and her future with Brett Kincaid. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Great performance tonight. Your wife took the bait completely. See." I deleted the message and closed my eyes. 3 more days, and this nightmare would be over. 3 more days, and Elise would learn what it felt like to be the mouse in someone else's trap. Saturday and Sunday passed in a strange state of suspended animation. Elise was practically vibrating with barely contained excitement, while I played the role of the oblivious husband who had no idea his world was about to change. On Saturday morning, she made my favorite breakfast, something she hadn't done in over a year. Pancakes, bacon, fresh coffee, the works. She was being so nice it was almost insulting. "You seem happy," I observed, cutting into my pancakes. "Just feeling good about things," she said, refilling my coffee cup. "Sometimes life has a way of working out exactly like it's supposed to." If she only knew. I spent Saturday in my workshop, a converted garage space where I keep my computers and electronics. It's my sanctuary, the one place in the house where Elise never goes. She claims the smell of solder and electronic components gives her headaches. What she doesn't know is that my workshop is where I've been coordinating my own endgame. I pulled out the secure laptop I use for sensitive work and opened the encrypted folder labeled Project Phoenix. Inside were copies of every document Walter had prepared, every piece of evidence Murphy had gathered, and a detailed timeline of everything that would happen starting Monday morning. At 9 a.m. Monday, Elise would be served with divorce papers at her office. The papers would include a restraining order preventing her from accessing our joint accounts, a detailed accounting of every dollar she'd moved, and photographic evidence of her affair with Brett Kincaid. At 9:15 a.m., Brett would be called into his supervisor's office to discuss irregularities in his expense reports. Murphy's contact and accounting had been very thorough. At 10 a.m., I would be meeting with my bank to freeze all joint accounts and establish new personal accounts in my name only. At 11 a.m., Walter would be filing motions to prevent Elise from claiming any portion of my business assets or retirement accounts based on her documented fraud and infidelity. By noon Monday, Elise's perfect plan would be in ruins, and she'd realize she'd been playing checkers while I was playing chess. Sunday evening, we had dinner at Romano's, our usual Italian place. Elise was practically glowing, chatting about work, asking about my week, playing the part of the loving wife one last time. "I was thinking," she said over dessert, "maybe we should take a vacation soon. Get away somewhere warm, reconnect." "That sounds nice," I said, knowing that by this time tomorrow, the only place Elise would be going is to her lawyer's office. "I love you, Simon," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I love you too," I replied, and for just a moment, I almost meant it. Not the woman sitting across it from me, but the woman I thought I'd married 8 years ago, the woman who'd existed before Brett Kincaid and secret bank accounts and elaborate schemes. But that woman was gone, if she'd ever really existed at all. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, typical October weather in Maine. Elise got up early, spending extra time on her hair and makeup. She was dressed for success, navy blue suit, professional but attractive, ready for what she thought would be her moment of triumph. "Big day at work?" I asked, adjusting my tie. "You could say that," she replied, checking her appearance one last time in the hallway mirror. "I have a feeling today is going to change everything." She had no idea how right she was. I kissed her goodbye at the front door, the same perfunctory gesture we'd been exchanging for months. But this time, I knew it was the last time. "Have a good day, honey," she said, practically skipping to her car. "You too, exe," I called back. "I hope you get everything you deserve." She drove away with a smile on her face, completely oblivious to the fact that her world was about to collapse. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then pulled out my phone and sent a single text message to Walter. "The Queen is in position. Execute the plan." His response came immediately. "Checkmate in 3 moves." I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat down at my kitchen table. In 30 minutes, Elise would be served with divorce papers. In an hour, Brett would be called into his supervisor's office. In 2 hours, I would own everything and Elise would own nothing but the consequences of her own choices. For the first time in months, I smiled. At exactly 9:03 a.m., my phone rang. Walter's gravelly voice was practically purring with satisfaction. "It's done. She's been served." How did she take it? About as well as you'd expect. Cassie said she went white as a sheet, then started screaming about how this was impossible, how she had evidence against you. The entire office heard her meltdown. I felt a dark satisfaction settle in my chest. And Brett? Murphy's contact called him into the office at 9:15. He should be getting fired right about now. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I didn't recognize it, but I knew who it was from. "You fool! You think you've won, but I have evidence. I have photos." Then another. "I saw you with that woman. Maggie has pictures." And another. "You're going to pay for this." I forwarded the messages to Walter with a note. "Evidence of maltreatment. Please add to the file." At 10 a.m., I was sitting in my bank manager's office, watching him freeze all joint accounts and transfer my assets into new personal accounts. Elise's secret account had also been frozen, pending investigation into the unauthorized transfers. "This is quite a situation, Mr. Barrett," said James Morrison, the bank manager. "I have to ask, are you sure about this course of action?" "Completely sure," I replied, signing the final documents. "My wife has been stealing from our joint accounts for months. I'm just protecting what's left of my assets." At 10:47 a.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Elise, and she was sobbing. "Simon, please, we need to talk. There's been a terrible mistake." "No mistake, Elise. I know about Brett. I know about the money. I know about your little loyalty test with Cassie." The silence on the other end was deafening. How did you really think I was that stupid? Did you honestly believe I wouldn't notice $47,000 disappearing from our accounts? Or that you were suddenly working late every Tuesday and Thursday? Simon, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been planning to destroy my life for months? How you hired what you thought was an actress to seduce me so you could claim infidelity in divorce court? Another long silence. She was supposed to be someone you could manipulate. Instead, she was my divorce attorney's assistant. We've been documenting your affair and your fraud for months, Elise. Every hotel receipt, every secret meeting, every dollar you stole. I could hear her crying, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, just cold satisfaction. The house is mine, I continued. The accounts are mine. Your secret account has been frozen. And Brett just got fired for expense fraud. Turns out all those business trips you two took together were billed to his company. You can't do this to me. I didn't do this to you, Elise. You did this to yourself. You just weren't as smart as you thought you were. At 11:30 a.m., Maggie Chen called me. Her voice was shaking with rage. You son of a witch! Elise is destroyed. She's sitting in her car crying in the parking lot. Maybe she should have thought about that before she tried to frame me for infidelity. She has pictures. I have pictures of you with that woman. You have pictures of me having a conversation with my divorce attorney's assistant. Pictures that prove your best friend tried to set me up. Pictures that will look great in court when they show premeditation and conspiracy. The line went dead. At noon, I was back in Walter's office, reviewing the final paperwork. Cassie was there too, looking satisfied with a job well done. Your wife's attorney called, Walter said. Apparently she wants to negotiate. What's her position? She claims she was temporarily insane, that Brett manipulated her, that she deserves half of everything because of the length of the marriage. I laughed. What did you tell them? I told them she could have her clothes and her car. Everything else belongs to you as compensation for fraud, theft, and emotional distress. And if she doesn't accept, then we go to court, where a judge will see every piece of evidence we've collected. The affair, the stolen money, the conspiracy to frame you. She'll be lucky to avoid criminal charges. Cassie spoke up. There's something else. Brett's wife found out about the affair. She's filing for divorce too, and she wants to use our evidence. The pieces were falling perfectly into place. Elise and Brett hadn't just destroyed their marriage to me. They'd destroyed everything. At 2 p.m., I drove home to the house that was now legally mine alone. Elise's car was in the driveway, and I could see her silhouette through the kitchen window. I found her sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by tissues, her makeup ruined, and her perfect composure completely shattered. "How long have you known?" she asked without looking up. "About Brett? 4 months. About your plan to frame me? 3 months. About Cassie being my attorney's assistant? From the beginning." She finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes, complete defeat. "I thought I was so clever," she whispered. "You thought I was stupid. There's a difference. What happens now? Now you pack your things and leave. The house is mine. The accounts are mine. You can stay with Maggie until you figure out your next move. Simon, please." "Please what? Please forgive you for stealing from me. Please forgive you for planning to destroy my reputation. Please pretend the last 6 months didn't happen." She started crying again, but I felt nothing. The woman I'd loved was gone, replaced by the stranger who'd tried to ruin my life for the sake of a mediocre sales director with a fancy car. "I'll give you 2 hours to pack," I said. "After that, I'm changing the locks." As I walked upstairs to my office, I heard her making phone calls, probably to Maggie, probably to whatever lawyer would take her case. But it didn't matter. The game was over, and she'd lost completely. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. There was one last email to send, one final move to make. The email went to Elise's boss, her HR department, and several of her colleagues. It contained no commentary, just a simple subject line regarding Elise Barrett's recent behavior. Attached were the text messages she'd sent to Cassie, detailing her plan to use a fake seduction to frame her husband for infidelity. Messages that showed premeditation, manipulation, and a complete lack of professional judgment. By tomorrow, everyone at her company would know exactly what kind of person Elise Barrett really was. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. Game over. Checkmate. I'd won. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the Blue Heron, the same bar where Elise had tried to spring her trap when she walked in. She looked terrible. Thinner, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that didn't fit properly. The polished suburban professional was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she hadn't slept in days. She spotted me immediately and walked over to my table. I didn't invite her to sit, but she sat anyway. "Hello, Simon." "Elise," I took a sip of my whiskey. "I heard Brett moved to Florida. Something about a fresh start." Her face crumpled slightly. "He said the situation here had become too complicated. He needed space to figure things out. Translation, he abandoned you the moment things got difficult. He said he loved me. He said a lot of things, apparently, most of them lies." She stared down at her hands. "I lost my job. I know. They said I showed poor judgment and violated company policy by trying to manipulate a personal situation using company resources. Cassie did work for a law firm. Technically, you did try to use her professional position for personal gain. You planned this, all of it, from the very beginning." I set down my glass and looked at her directly. "No, Elise, you planned this. You planned to steal my money, destroy my reputation, and frame me for infidelity. I just planned better. I never meant for it to go this far. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You just meant for me to be the one destroyed at the end." She was crying now, but quietly, trying not to make a scene. "I don't know what I'm going to do. Maggie's getting tired of me staying at her place. I can't find another job. Everyone in town knows what happened." "You could move, start over somewhere else." "With what money? You took everything." "I took back what you stole, plus compensation for fraud and emotional distress. There's a difference. Simon, please, I'm begging you. I'll sign anything you want. I'll disappear completely. Just give me enough to start over." I studied her face, looking for any sign of the woman I'd once loved. But all I saw was desperation and self-pity. No remorse for what she'd done to me. No acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused, just anger that her plan had failed. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "If you'd just asked for a divorce, I probably would have given you half of everything. We could have split amicably, maybe even stayed friends." "I know, I realize that now. But that wasn't enough for you. You didn't just want out of the marriage. You wanted to punish me for not being exciting enough, successful enough, interesting enough. You wanted to take everything and leave me with nothing." "That's not true." "It's completely true. You and Brett didn't just plan to divorce me. You planned to destroy me. The loyalty test, the fake evidence, the stolen money, all of it was designed to make sure I ended up with nothing while you rode off into the sunset with your exciting new boyfriend. She couldn't deny it because we both knew it was true. The problem with your plan, I continued, was that you underestimated me. You thought I was just some boring IT guy who wouldn't fight back. You thought I'd roll over and let you take everything. I was wrong. You were wrong about a lot of things. You were wrong about Brett, wrong about Cassie, wrong about how smart you are, and most of all, wrong about how much I was willing to lose without fighting back. I finished my whiskey and stood up. Goodbye, Elise. I hope Florida works out for you. I'm not going to Florida. Then I hope whatever you do works out, but either way, we're done here. I walked toward the door, but she called after me. Simon, wait. I turned back. Do you hate me? I thought about it for a moment, really considered the question. Did I hate her, or did I just hate what she'd done? No, I said finally. I don't hate you, but I don't love you either. You're just nothing to me now, a stranger who used to live in my house. That seemed to hurt her more than anger would have. I left her sitting alone in the Blue Heron, the same bar where she'd thought she was so clever, so in control. The bar where her perfect plan had begun its spectacular collapse. 3 months later, I heard she'd moved to Boston, found a job at a smaller company, started over with a new identity and a carefully edited history. Maggie told people that Elise had been the sufferer of a vindictive husband, but most people in Millbrook knew the truth. Brett never came back from Florida. Word was he'd found another married woman to charm, another life to disrupt. Some people never learn. As for me, I kept the house, kept my business, and eventually started dating again. Nothing serious, just dinner and conversation with women who were honest about what they wanted. I never saw Elise again after that night at the Blue Heron. Sometimes I wondered if she'd learned anything from the experience, if she'd gained any insight into the kind of person she'd become. But mostly, I didn't think about her at all. The house was quieter without her, but it was also more peaceful. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more wondering if the person sleeping next to me was planning my destruction. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Walter Peck called to tell me that Elise's lawyer had withdrawn a final appeal. It was over, completely and legally over. How does it feel to win? Walter asked. I thought about it. Did it feel like winning, or did it just feel like surviving? It feels like justice, I said finally. She tried to destroy me, and instead she destroyed herself. That's not winning, that's just the natural consequence of her choices. Fair enough. What's next for you? Next, I live my life. The life she tried to take away from me. I hung up and looked around my house, not our house, and felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Peace. Elise had thought she was playing chess, moving pieces around a board, manipulating people and situations to get what she wanted. But she'd forgotten the most important rule of chess. The game isn't over until someone says checkmate. And I'd been planning my final move from the very beginning.